for everyone. Food for Thank you very much, darling. You take care of yourself.
Former President Donald Trump has had his day in court for his arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty to the 37 classified documents charge. Now, this situation in regards to President Trump is not going to be so much about if you like Trump or you don't like him because of his personality or his policies. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that we want to make sure that the law is being upheld and is being consistent across all spectrums. Because if we're going to say Trump did something illegal and he should be prosecuted for, but then we have to look at something that happened prior to that, or even something that happened similar to that around the same time, and just determine, is that being upheld as well? I mean, whataboutism is a good thing because it makes you want to judge a precedent to determine that the precedent is being followed through in similar situations. And this is basically a similar situation to what happened to Joe Biden, because in August of 2022, when Trump's Mar-a-Lago location was raided for classified documentations that they felt were in an unsecured location, similar situation happened 3 months later to President Biden in November of 2022. They found basically documents at his Penn Biden Center at the University of Pennsylvania, and pretty much nothing happened to President Biden. I mean, the media basically, of course, caked up for him. They basically said that there was no similarities in the two situations. I mean, just listen to them right here.
This case is different than the documents case and that situation that was found at Mar-a-Lago.
Very different in quantity and duration from what Donald Trump refused to return from his Mar-a-Lago club.
There is a difference between the former president's situation and this one, because there are some perhaps differences here.
That there are differences in what happened.
Yes.
I want to be clear, the facts are different than the Trump case.
There's a big difference here. Some would say this is apples and oranges.
So the media was so quick to, refute any type of similarity, trying to say that they're not the same, that Trump had more documents. It doesn't matter. Classified documents is classified documents. Classified documents that's unauthorized and it's in an unsecured location is all the same, whether it's one document or 1,000. But when the similarity is still there, regardless of the number amount, they would still refute it, and they basically would say that the intent was not there. And it makes you wonder, how can you determine the intent? They're going to say the intent from President Biden is that it was accidentally placed there or it was inadvertently placed there. But with President Trump, it's basically stated that his intent was malicious, was he wanted to do something wrong. How can you prove that? And you can't say, oh, we have audio and video, because if you have that on President Trump, then we could do another whataboutism. What about when President Biden basically incriminated himself by doing a quid pro quo with Ukraine by wanting them to remove a lawyer that was investigating his company over there with Burisma?
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
So what about that? We're going to have to ask these questions, because whataboutism, like I said, it basically upholds a precedent. If this happens here and nothing is done, then you can't do nothing here, because otherwise you just showing favoritism. And that's obviously what's happening here, because apparently President Trump is not liked by many, and he's not liked by either party, Democrat, Republican. I mean, the Uniparty basically don't like him. He's basically tapped into something. He's digging to a place where they don't want to be dug at, and they don't want him to continue to move any further. It's just basically very obvious in this situation right here. And the fact that these things are very similar between Trump and President Biden, the media knows this, and they want to get ahead of the story. So of course they're going to shame anybody for asking these questions about whataboutism. I mean, they even did a segment right here to basically shame anybody to even think this way.
Well, Barbara, let's get that and also talk about your latest article for Time entitled The Dangerous Whataboutism in the Trump Classified Documents Case. And in it, Barbara, you write in part this. The indictment of Donald Trump on charges of retaining government documents brought with it the inevitable false equivalencies of the conduct of Trump's chief political rival. But the actions of the two men are different, as deliberately driving your car into a crowd of people and committing a fender bender. Both acts involves cars, but the similarities end there. Whataboutism may have become a common political ploy, but it is a trick straight out of the disinformation playbook. You continue. Whataboutism is a strategy used by authoritarian leaders to excuse their own misconduct, and that it's an essential piece of Kremlin tradecraft. The goal of this tactic is not to convince the public that the leader is innocent, but to portray all politicians as dishonest. Anyone claiming to value integrity is scoffed at as duplicitous or naive. And here we go with Trump and a lot of people who follow Trump and a lot of leaders in Congress playing that game straight on, even when nuclear secrets are involved.
Man, they always compare Trump to anything that's Russian. Russia. I mean, and that's a segment that mentioned the Kremlin tradecraft. I mean, it doesn't make it too obvious. Obviously, because anything Russia or Russian is considered an enemy or is considered an opposition to American freedom. So if they could link Trump to Putin or Russia, you know, boom, they basically say they're two of the same. You know, two peas in the same pot. I mean, this media, they don't have a lot of tricks in the bag. Now, also, with whataboutism, you want to say to yourself, what about Hillary Clinton? I mean, granted, it happened about 6-7 years ago, but in her situation, she basically had over 30,000 emails removed. I mean, she used a software program called BleachBit to basically remove a large amount of emails, some that were classified. When there was being, I believe she's going to be subpoenaed for the 2012 Benghazi terrorist attacks. And nothing really happened there because once again, the FBI director just went by, intent. I believe his name is James Comey. Basically just said that granted, Hillary Clinton was extremely negligent and she was extremely careless in her ways of handling the emails. But he ended up saying that there was no wrongful intent. Bro, how do you know that? You just basically said that, okay, she was negligent, but there was no wrongful intent. You can't determine that. He should basically have compiled the information, send it over to the Department of Justice, and make them make that determination, if anything. But no, that didn't happen. Because apparently he was afraid that she would become president and eventually by become president, become his boss. So we see a pattern here. We see a pattern of who gets the privilege of not being prosecuted and basically who does not. Who does not is a person that basically is not falling in line. And also, we know Donald Trump pretty much walks to the beat of his own drum. So he's not falling in line, apparently, with the uniparty and the deep state in D.C. So from the state prosecution with Alan Bragg in New York City involving funds paid to Stormy Daniels, to the sexual abuse case with Jean Carroll that happened 30, 40 years ago, supposedly, to now this situation about the classified documentations at Mar-a-Lago, they basically trying real hard for something to stick on Trump. It's so apparent. It's just so obvious. You just cannot avoid it. I mean, it's so obvious that they're not afraid to say the quiet part out loud, like what Rachel Maddow did right here.
You have to wonder if the Justice Department is considering whether there is some political solution to this criminal problem, whether part of the issue here is not just that Trump has committed crimes, but that Trump has committed crimes and plans on being back in the White House. Do they consider, as part of a potential plea offer, something that would proscribe him from running for office again? I don't know.
I would imagine if anything like that happened, that it would have to come from the defense side of the negotiation.
So that's what it's all about, folks, man. It's all about elections. They're afraid about Donald Trump winning the 2024 election, which I believe he is leading right now in the primaries. They're not worried about Ron DeSantis. They're not worried about Chris Christie. They're not worried about I don't know, Robert F. Kennedy. They're not worried about these other potential contenders, whether on the Democratic or Republican side. They worry about Trump. And that basically says something right here. So we have to ask these questions, and we have to push to get these questions to be answered. Because if they're not answered, then we obviously see that it's going to be one-sided, which is very obvious in this particular situation. And one last thing I want to ask about whataboutism is that, what about Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, think about it. The whole situation, we want to focus on Trump, have blinders on, not to focus on things to our left and right, when at the same time, Chase does basically settle for over almost $300 million to pay out to the victims of the Jeffrey Epstein case. I mean, it was pretty much a blip on the map. They hardly want to cover this in the media.
News has to do with Jeffrey Epstein and J.P. Morgan. I don't know if you saw the headline cross.
Yes.
Lots of focus on that this morning. That bank making a settlement deal with some of the victims involved in that, having transferred money and done business with Jeffrey Epstein after they knew about his transgressions. Let's just call them
his transgressions. Let's just call it that. No, bro, to say what it was. He was sexually abusing children. That was his transgressions. And a lot of people was involved in that. A lot of people. But that's a big whataboutism right there. Because if you're not asking questions, the media's not asking direct questions about Jeffrey Epstein, I don't know what else to say, man. I mean, that's a huge elephant in the room that everyone's trying to avoid in the media and also in DC politics. But to keep the focus right here, the situation with Trump is that he's going to basically have all these daggers thrown at him. But we as a public, we have to see it for what it is and not focus on the fact of who he is and how he made us feel and, the policies he passed or the policies he did not pass. It has nothing to do about that. It's about showing consistency and holding up the principle of our judicial system. And those things right now are not being upheld because you're upholding one man to one standard and another man and another woman to another standard, which basically shows favoritism. And we have to ask why they're offering that favoritism to the Democratic side of the aisle. And I don't believe it's more of a Democratic or Republican situation, but more of a who's who and who they're like that's going to push this particular narrative into the American society. And apparently Trump is not that guy. But hey, you let me know. Leave a comment down below. Do you believe that these charges against Donald Trump will stick? Or will Teflon Don just dodge another one? We'll see.